BlackRock's secret bet on XDC. It was all planned. The playbook wasn't public, but it was always in motion. The financial world has been distracted. Every eye was glued to the spectacle, the SEC drama, the Bitcoin ETF approvals, Ethereum's roadmaps, Solana's speed metrics, memecoins on parade. Noise everywhere. But beneath the noise, the real power players weren't reacting. They were executing. And they weren't chasing the headlines, they were engineering the future of finance from the inside out. Enter BlackRock, the biggest asset manager on the planet with over $10 trillion under management, didn't suddenly wake up to crypto. They've been watching, waiting, positioning. While retail chased green candles, they focused on tokenization of real-world assets. Bonds, equities, supply chain instruments, and more, bringing legacy value onto blockchain rails. But not just any blockchain. A hybrid blockchain. One that could satisfy both TradFi institutions and decentralized visionaries. And that's exactly where XDC enters the picture. Not as a trend, not as a gamble, but as a strategic foundation for digitizing global value, in a way that's regulatory compliant, enterprise-ready, and deeply interoperable with existing systems like SWIFT, ISO 20022, and trade finance protocols. This wasn't some random choice. They chose XDC for its low fees, lightning-fast settlement, privacy features, permissioned functionality, and a growing list of government and institutional integrations. They chose it because it solves problems other chains weren't even built to consider. This isn't some fringe theory. This is what happens when legacy power aligns with next-gen infrastructure and builds in silence. And now the signs are surfacing. Quiet partnerships, back-end integrations. The same institutions that scoffed at crypto a decade ago are now laying tracks through XDC, moving freight behind the curtain before the rest of the market even knows a train is coming. So if you're holding, if you're curious, if you're even remotely paying attention, this is not the time to blink. Because when giants move quietly, they're not hiding. They're staking territory before the gates open. And by the time the rest of the world catches up, it'll already be built. Stay with me. What you're about to see will rewire the way you think about crypto utility and who's really in control. The quiet blueprint for a new financial system. While retail investors were chasing meme coins and speculating on daily swings, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, was drafting the foundation of the next financial infrastructure. And they weren't drawing on Ethereum. They weren't mapping it on Solana. Their blueprint? It's silently aligned with the strengths and design of XDC. Let's break that down. BlackRock's push into tokenization of real-world assets, RWAs, isn't just an experiment. It's a transition plan. Their CEO, Larry Fink, has said it plainly. The next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization. But for that vision to take shape, you don't just need any chain. You need a blockchain that's fast, cheap, scalable, ISO 20022 compliant, interoperable with existing financial systems, built from the ground up for enterprise-grade settlement. XDC doesn't just meet these requirements. It was designed for them. This isn't speculative alignment. This is architectural alignment. The XDC Network's hybrid blockchain model offers private transaction capabilities and public ledger validation. A model that mirrors exactly what institutions like BlackRock require. Compliance, privacy, and transparency in one system. While other chains fight over DeFi dominance or NFT trends, XDC has quietly built bridges with trade finance platforms, R3 Corda, and regulatory compliant corridors that plug directly into the same rails institutional players are preparing to onboard. And here's the kicker. BlackRock's investments and partnerships in the tokenization space, including with firms like Securitize, JP Morgan Onyx, and R3, don't just coexist with XDC's infrastructure. They overlap. They complement. In several cases, they depend on the same tokenization architecture that XDC is powering. The roadmap is hiding in plain sight, and every line on that map points straight to XDC. This isn't a guess. This is a converging strategy, one that's been years in the making. The institutional tokenization roadmap and why it all leads to XDC. Here's what the mainstream headlines aren't telling you. The race to tokenize real-world assets. Everything from treasuries to real estate, from carbon credits to private equity has already begun. And the winners won't be the loudest projects on social media. They'll be the chains quietly woven into institutional back-end systems. That's where XDC comes in. While Ethereum was still struggling with gas fees and congestion, and while Solana was battling downtime issues, XDC was being built for enterprise stability, deliberately aligning with the needs of the very institutions now moving billions into tokenized assets. Let's go deeper. ISO 20022 integration. The new messaging standard for global finance is ISO 20022. SWIFT is adopting it. So are the world's top banks. And guess what? XDC is ISO 20022 compliant by design. That makes it one of the very few blockchains ready to plug into the core infrastructure of the legacy financial world. Our 3-Corda partnership. You've heard of our 3-Corda, the enterprise blockchain trusted by over 300 financial institutions, including ING, HSBC, and Nasdaq. Here's what you might not know. Corda doesn't have its own native settlement token, so when transactions on Corda require settlement on-chain, they need a bridge. And guess who provides it? XDC. XDC is the only digital asset integrated into Corda for public blockchain settlement. That's not a theory. That's a pipeline, an institutional corridor already laid down and ready for capital flow. Tokenization portals and platforms. BlackRock's move into tokenization isn't in isolation. It connects to a growing ecosystem securitized Onyx by JP Morgan, Broadridge, and more. And many of these platforms are building interoperable frameworks that align perfectly with XDC's hybrid blockchain model. These platforms don't want exposure to volatility or regulatory gray zones. They want stability, compliance, and control, all of which XDC's architecture delivers. Let's not forget, XDC is EVM compatible, allowing smart contracts with ease. It offers 2-second finality and near-zero gas fees. It's built to support tokenized trade finance, bonds, and securities, the exact use cases BlackRock is aiming to bring on-chain. Everything is converging. If you overlay a map of institutional tokenization strategies, from JP Morgan's Onyx to our 3's Corda, from Swift's ISO migration to the rise of ESG assets, every arrow starts pointing in the same direction. That direction, XDC corridors. And here's the part most people miss. BlackRock doesn't need to say XDC in a press release. They don't need to make noise. Their strategy is layered through platforms, integrations, and back-end infrastructure deals that ultimately route value through XDC, whether retail sees it or not. This is institutional capital forming its own lanes. And those lanes? They're converging on the XDC network. BlackRock didn't pick XDC by accident. It's built for the game they're playing. Let's pull back the curtain. BlackRock isn't in the business of guessing. They don't throw darts at a board labeled blockchains and hope one sticks. They move with precision. They operate with intent. When they choose a network to align with, you can be certain it has passed through layers of due diligence, infrastructure stress tests, regulatory compatibility assessments, and long-term integration strategies. So why XDC? Because XDC is more than a blockchain. It's financial-grade infrastructure disguised as a Layer 1 protocol. Let's start with the basics. XDC is ISO 20022 compliant, meaning it speaks the same language as banks, clearinghouses, SWIFT systems, and governments. That's not a gimmick. That's a prerequisite. If you're planning to move trillions of dollars of tokenized assets over the next decade, compliance isn't optional. It's the foundation. XDC's delegated proof of stake consensus means transactions are fast, efficient, and incredibly low cost. We're talking near-zero fees. That's crucial when you're handling microsettlements, tokenized invoices, or transferring ownership of tokenized bonds across jurisdictions. But infrastructure alone doesn't guarantee institutional adoption. The real key, integration. XDC is already embedded in pilots and platforms where real value moves, TradeFinix for trade finance, our 3-Corda for enterprise-grade digital contracts, and a range of private and hybrid networks that are testing the waters for tokenized debt and asset-backed securities. This isn't some maybe in 5 years vision. It's happening now. Look at what BlackRock is truly after: tokenized securities, tokenized real estate, tokenized treasuries. These aren't speculative assets. They're the core of the traditional financial system. And bringing them on-chain isn't about speed. It's about legal clarity, regulatory recognition, institutional custody, and final settlement. Bitcoin can't handle that. Ethereum is too expensive and congested. Most so-called Ethereum alternatives are playgrounds for speculation, not platforms for capital markets. But XDC? XDC is a corridor, a neutral, interoperable, scalable network, already connected to the financial plumbing that matters. Already talking to the right APIs, the right data layers, the right compliance rails. Already building quietly where others scream loudly. The institutional roadmap to tokenization wasn't written overnight. It has been in motion for years. Central banks rolling out digital IDs and CBDCs, governments tokenizing bonds, private institutions testing tokenized credit lines, supply chains digitizing invoices. Every step of that roadmap needs corridors. Quiet highways that allow assets to move across borders, platforms, and counterparties, with privacy, compliance, and certainty. And guess who's been building one this entire time? BlackRock didn't bet on XDC like a gambler. They selected it like an engineer picks steel for a skyscraper, because it holds under pressure, performs under load, and integrates seamlessly into the design. XDC isn't riding BlackRock's coattails. It might be holding the architecture together. The timeline tells the truth. Let's zoom out, really zoom out. Because when you follow the money, the partnerships, the tech stack, and the timing, one thing becomes crystal clear. This was never about hype. It was about architecture. And the blueprint was laid years ago. 2018. The World Economic Forum begins championing tokenization, not as a crypto idea, but as a transformational shift in the global economy. It wasn't a fringe conversation. It was a directive, a whisper to insiders that the next financial rails would be digital, programmable, and borderless. 2019 to 2021. While most were distracted by the bull run, the XDC Foundation and TradeFinix were engineering the plumbing for trade finance tokenization, quietly, methodically. They weren't chasing headlines. They were solving real-world settlement problems that banks, governments, and institutions face every day. 2022. ISO 20022, the messaging standard for global financial institutions, begins global adoption. And guess who's already ready? XDC. It didn't scramble to catch up. It was built for this. Fully compliant. Seamless. Positioned. 2023. BlackRock applies for a Bitcoin ETF. The world assumes it's about BTC. But in reality, it's a Trojan horse, a move to normalize the infrastructure for tokenized assets within legacy finance. Quietly, discussions begin around underlying rails that can handle institutional-grade tokenization. 2024. Whispers become louder. Back-end integrations, internal testing, and strategic moves start surfacing, and several reports link BlackRock's experimental tokenization layers to platforms that are XDC compatible. Not theoretical, operational. All the while, the spotlight was elsewhere. You heard about meme coins. You saw influencers fight over staking yields. You watched congestion plague layer 1s and layer 2s. But the real money wasn't watching that. It was watching corridors, standards, compliance, infrastructure, and that's exactly where XDC was operating. Now fast forward to today. Central banks are rolling out CBDCs. SWIFT is trialing blockchain interoperability. Private wealth funds are preparing to tokenize real estate, bonds, and carbon credits. And institutions? They're not building hype. They're building exits from legacy friction. They want speed, compliance, and finality at scale. They want corridors. They want bridges. They want what XDC has already built. So when you hear BlackRock is entering crypto, don't get distracted by the headlines. Study their silence. Study their partnerships. Study their timing. And when you follow that trail, from Larry Fink to ISO 20022, from tokenized treasuries to global trade, you don't end up in Ethereum or Solana. You land squarely in XDC territory. And that's exactly where this was heading from the beginning. This isn't speculation, it's strategy. Everything you've seen, the partnerships, the quiet integrations, the silence from media, points to one reality. This was never about hype. It's about infrastructure. BlackRock isn't making noise. They're making moves, real ones, and XDC is threaded deep into that institutional roadmap. While the public obsessed over meme coins and the next bull flag, BlackRock followed utility. And that trail led straight to XDC's tokenized corridors. This isn't a guess. It's a map, and the destinations are already being built behind closed doors. They didn't just pick XDC out of thin air. They aligned with it, integrated with it, structured around it. Because XDC isn't here to impress Twitter. It's here to move value, scale. Within the regulatory lines the world's largest firms demand. And when the lights come on and the rest of the market finally sees it, it'll already be too late to get in this early. So here's what you do right now. Dig deeper, research the institutions already piloting tokenized assets. Look at where they're building, not tweeting. Double down. If you believe in tokenization, study XDC like your portfolio depends on it, because it might. Share this video. Don't let your circle sleep on this. If even 1% of this is true, the upside is generational. Stay ahead, subscribe, follow, and turn on alerts. Because every step BlackRock takes from here, we'll be decoding it in real time. This isn't just about holding tokens. It's about holding insight and acting before the headlines catch up. This is XDC. This is the infrastructure era. And you're not just watching it happen. You're early enough to front-run the future. Act accordingly.